Mr. Chairman, this is Teresa.
Hi, Teresa.
We're ready to begin when you are.
Okay, thank you very much. We will call to order the Town of Hilton Head Island Design Review Board meeting for Tuesday, September 22nd and the year 2020. Are we in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, sir, we are.
Thank you. And would you please call roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Lippert?
Here.
Ms. Foss?
Here.
Mr. McAllister?
Here.
Mr. Molesky?
Here.
Mr. Karstens?
Here.
Mr. Gentleman?
Here.
And Ms. Remke is excused.
Okay, thank you. Move on to approval of agenda. Does staff have any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. May I have a motion? And this is an open motion meeting. So may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. McAllister. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Foss. All right, board members, if you have any changes to the agenda, please state them when Teresa calls your name. Otherwise, simply vote yes or no to approve the agenda. Teresa, if you'd please do the roll.
Ms. Lippert?
Yes.
Ms. Foss?
Yes.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Karstens?
Yes.
Mr. Gentleman?
Yes, so the agenda is approved unanimously. Next, we will move on to the approval of the meeting minutes from the meeting of September 8th, 2020. I assume everyone's had a chance to review them. And may I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the September 8th, 2020 meeting.
All right, thank you. We have a motion by Mr. McAllister. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, excuse me, from Mr. Molesky. And again, if you have any changes or comments, please state them as you are being called for roll. Otherwise, vote yes or no. Ms. Teresa, call roll.
Ms. Lippert?
Yes.
Ms. Foss?
Yes.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Karstens?
Yes.
Mr. Gentleman?
Yes, so the meeting minutes from September 8th, 2020 are approved unanimously. Mr. Chris, are there any citizen comments for this meeting?
No, there are not. And Mr. Chairman, public comments concerning business items were to be submitted electronically via the town's open town hall portal. The portal closed at noon yesterday, and there were no comments of record. Citizens were provided the option to sign up for this public comment participation by phone during the meeting. The public comment period closed at noon yesterday, and there were no requests from citizens to participate by phone.
All right, thank you, Chris. All right, then we'll move on. First, we have old business, new development, conceptual for Mitchellville Lot 11.
I'm
DRB.
sorry, Mr. Chairman, I need to recuse myself for this project.
Oh, yes, that's right. Thank you. Mr. McAllister will be excused from this one. So we have, again, for the record, old business, new development, conceptual, Mitchellville Lot 11, DRB-001-801-2020. And Chris, could you please give the staff presentation?
Yes, sir, gladly, Mr. Chairman. The site is outlined in red on your screen. To the upper side of your screen and right is the Atlantic Ocean. and Mitchellville Road is running sort of dogleg around here, like so. Off to the bottom, diagonal right is Beach City Road. Down here, if you can see it on the screen. Does everybody have an idea of where we are? Well, let me know if there's not. If nobody understands, I'm sorry. If you do not know where we are, please indicate and I'll try to help you. Okay, I don't see any. So moving on. This project will develop a new 45-unit multifamily building on Mitchellville Road. The project proposes 3 buildings on the site. All buildings are podium style with a concrete structure on the bottom and parking at the ground level. The 4 stories above the podium deck will be wood frame construction with fiber cement siding. The ground level parking will be screened with a slat wall fence at the perimeter and considerable foundation plantings. The roof will be metal and concealed mechanical units on the courtyard side of the roof. The main building will have 37 total units and the main amenity spaces. The 2 oceanfront buildings will have 4 units each. There is a large pool deck with an amenity and bathroom building to support the pool. Beach access is also planned from the development. The site has a large area of wetlands on the Mitchellville Road side of the property and several specimen trees on the rear of the property. Staff recommends conceptual approval with a suggestion that staff comments be added to the NOA as conditions. So here are just some pictures of the existing vegetation on the site. This is the conceptual site plan. It's included because the significant specimen and significant trees are noted. This is the conceptual site plan with the tree removals requested, or that will be requested. You can see the wetlands out here. This is the layout of the 3 buildings, the large one in the back with the 2 out here and the pool deck. You can see the pool buildings here and the beach access here. This is the 1st through 4th floor levels. This is the roof plan for the development. Here you can see the front elevation of the building and a side elevation proposed. Again, the rear and a side. A section through the building. These are the ocean side buildings. Again, looking straight on and a side view. And looking out towards the ocean at the top and looking back into the development at the bottom. An illustration of the side setback and angled setback. That concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Let me 1 second. All right, the applicant will have 10 minutes, and after you've all have identified yourself for the record, Teresa will run the timer beginning after the introductions. So I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. This is Steve Stowers from Architecture 101. It's always a pleasure to be in front of you guys. So the changes that we listened to your all's comments during last month's meeting, and we feel like we've reflected all of those changes in this current submission. The building that you're looking at in this submission is 22 feet narrower than the building that we submitted last week or last meeting. It's also about 10,000 square feet smaller. And it's a little bit because of just the overall site footprint. It's hard to perceive that, but we took your guidance on the side buffers to heart and really worked hard to increase them as much as we could without turning the center space, the space with the pool, into a canyon, for lack of a better term. So we pushed it as far as we thought was advisable. And then we also we did some small changes to the architecture to minimize the side appearance of the building. The roof lines, we've incorporated some flat roof areas, which also are principally now where our mechanical units are. So if you'll notice if you can go to the perspectives, Chris, that'd be helpful. And the corners or the hinge points of the building, now there's a step down, whereas that used to be a continuous roof. So the roof line itself reads more like 3 separate buildings as opposed to one big monolithic building, which was the original presentation. And then the front roof element, which we had a lot of positive feedback from in our initial conceptual design, is mirrored on both of the side elevations. So you have that same architectural look on both of the sides as well. And then we've stepped down the end of the building with a low slope and then a 3.5-story element, which was 4.5 stories, but 3.5 stories above podium and on the 2 ends, which further helps emphasizes the height, trying to be a little bit more sensitive to the overall scale of the building. And then the other notable change that you'll see is that if you can go to the site plan, Chris, the tree that was in the northwest corner, it's a specimen live oak tree. It's a cluster live oak up in would be planned north on this. Because we've narrowed the project and stepped further away from those property lines, we can now keep that tree. We feel comfortable that tree will be safe in this design. So at this point, we're only removing significant specimen trees that are either dead or dying or have some underlying major flaws to them, which is there is a laurel oak on the site that is leaning quite a bit, and so that's one that we don't think we can safely design around. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have. Thank you for the time.
All right, thanks, Steve. All right, so Mr. McAllister is excused from this one. Mr. Karstens, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I certainly appreciate the consideration that the applicant has put towards the previous comments. I echo staff's sentiment about the parking circulation still being a little tight, especially for underbuilding. Looking at, obviously, we've been looking at those 2 smaller buildings. Seem to be the ones that are the sticking point for that particular item. Another thing would be is just confirming wetland setbacks and knowing that that'll be in final. Excuse me. Your setbacks for both your building, your impervious surfaces. I know there's a wetland impact on the front part of the portion. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And we'll just want to make sure that those buffers and setbacks have been respected there. And finally, I didn't notice that there was, I see the 15-foot tree protection zones on the plans, but I'm not noticing where there was a canopy survey for those significant trees. Knowing that these trees, they are kind of in a wooded condition where there probably are more of an upright, I mean, especially seeing some of the photos, it looks like they're more of an upright condition. It'd just be nice to know, if there's going to be some significant limbs or something in the fact that you're going to have these tall structures surrounding these trees. If it really is going to be, a greater impact to those trees, considering the proximity to those buildings, and just having a canopy survey obviously helps to understand the limits and what's being impacted there. But I'll leave most of the facade and architectural comments to my peers, but those were my main points as far as the trees. Knowing the wetland setbacks were final, and then again, just trying to clarify that parking circulation for the end of those last two outermost buildings.
All right. Thanks, Jed. Ms. Lippert.
So thank you, and I appreciate the efforts that have been made in revising the massing, though I do agree with a lot of I agree with those comments made by staff. It helped for you to be talking through the massing and articulating that it now reads as 3 buildings. The massing question as stepping down towards the beach, to me, has not yet been addressed. And I realize that would be at the cost of more units. I think that's still the challenge of from the views that one's really going to see, is the public is going to see it a lot from the beach, and from that, it massing wise, to me, still reads very much like the last submittal. I do appreciate the move of the pool building being backed up against the building, and therefore opening up the views both from the beach as far as, and also for the residents, completely out towards the beach. I think that's a really good move relative to where that pool house was one larger structure sort of blocking those views. So I really appreciate that move. I had a question, this is probably more for Chris, on the west elevation angle setback. I'm not that steadfast. Is that allowed to cross over into the roof overhang?
It's my understanding that yes, that eave can penetrate into that setback, but I will check that.
Okay, that was just something that kind of caught my eye. It still just feels like a very massive building. I'm wondering if an articulation on the surround of the garage level would help break that down. I think like some of the things that I think are working well with helping with some of the massing are those dark brown vertical elements that are piercing through all the way down to the ground. I also see that you took some of the base material and brought it up one floor. All of those things I think are helping. I think the facades where it is identical on all 4 floors, those are the ones that are still hindering the massing of feeling less large. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Annette. Mr. Molesky.
Sure, thanks. Yes, I agree to some of the same comments that Annette just shared. I definitely appreciate you moving the pool house. I think that looks a lot better. If you could turn to, I believe it was sheet RB 12. Perfect, thanks. And again, I understand this is just a rendering here, but when I look at the top picture, I think that's probably the best example of the plainness. I love the front elevation. I love what you've done there. I think that breaks it up a lot. But looking at that top picture right there, seeing all that horizontal lap siding with the white trim around the windows, it looks very much like a track home, production home, which I'm sure is not your goal because so many of the other elevations just look so much more exciting than that. And perhaps this is just this one perspective, but I think that's a very good example of where I think that the project still has room for improvement. And then the same thing, looking at that same sheet, RB12, looking at the bottom picture, if we look at that elevation that's facing the ocean, the inside portion that has all the sliders and all the railings on it, I think that looks great. It breaks it up. But then again, the outside portion, now we're back just to, it seems like a large expanse of 4 floors of nothing but horizontal lap siding with white windows. It just seems right there. Maybe if you could take some of the interest that you have in the other elevations and apply it to that, whether it be come up to the first floor and have a different color on there just to break up the massing, or introduce some vertical elements that perhaps tie the windows together. I just think there's an opportunity right there to make that a little more interesting. Other than that, I think you guys are definitely going in the right direction. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Ms. Foss.
I wasn't here the last review, and so I don't have a lot to comment on how it's gotten changed, but from my first visit to this, I'm really disappointed at how austere it is. It's a beachfront place. It needs a lot more texture, a lot more in and out, a lot more, I'm going to call activity with the surroundings. It really seems like there's a hotel right on the beachfront, and Mitchellville, and especially in that area, is all natural. And this doesn't appear natural to me in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not discounting your architecture. I think it looks lovely, but I don't think it looks lovely on Mitchellville Road on the waterfront. If you could have different textures, different roof levels, I understand you changed them from what the board had already suggested last week, but I'm still feeling like this is a big, solid structure without reference to the environment. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Foss. Kathy, since you weren't here last time, what is your feeling on the scale of the building?
Too large. It's just dominating that beachfront. In fact, as I said, it's all natural there basically, and it dominates it and takes front stage when we don't need that here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I have, I'm going to sound repetitive from last time. I think the building looks great. I love the plan. I think you did a great job laying out the plan. I like how the pool's secluded. I like how all the units have views. It all works for me. I just wish your lot was, 50% wider. And I still believe it needs to be shorter. I like the details. I think Steve's done a good job of giving it some textural differences and things like that. It's got a little bit more modern look, and I think that's okay. And I think part of that is the presentation style. It makes it look maybe a little more slick than touchy-feely. But I like the look of the building, and I did last time, and I like this. I like what you did at the corners. I think that helps. Now, the part where you made the roof a flat roof, that in itself isn't really the solution we were looking for, I don't think, because we want roofs. We don't want flat roofs. So, yeah, so I'm pointing, and you guys can't see what I'm pointing at, but kind of that bottom drawing to the right where it turned into a flat roof. There we go. it didn't help the cause because it's still a 5-story wall. Um, so, my thought is, and to put this into scale for everyone, those that were here for the Gartner Drive, uh, just for comparison purposes, the old or the current Christian Academy site that we reviewed, I think probably half of us reviewed it. Those were 3 stories and 4 stories total. These are 5, and I just think it's too tall. I think I think that front elevation's attractive. I think that could actually maybe stay as it is because it's the short side of that building is facing the neighbors. So they're seeing only, if you look at that bottom left drawing, the neighbors are really on that particular building, or if we count that as a building, are really only seeing the side elevation. It's when you turn the corner, the parallel to the lot where the hand is, the cursor is, that stretch right there, it's right up on the property line, and it's just big. I think that needs to be a story less. And the same, I think Miss Flipper brought up, yeah, Miss Flipper brought up the idea of stepping down towards the water. I think those 2 separate buildings in the back and the 2 on the side need to be a story shorter. And then I could probably live with the tall one in the middle, facing the street, because we're 180 feet from the street or 200 feet from the street, however far we are. So that one's a little bit different for me. But all in all, I think it's a great building. And I think staff, all their comments were good. And Judd, I have a question for you. Okay, before I ask Judd the question, I think there needs to be a little bit more room between the fire lane and the face of the building. And right now it only looks like about, if you could go to a site plan, it shows, yeah, right there. That to me doesn't look like enough space to get in any type of foundation plantings. One of the drawings had an arrow pointed to it, said foundation plantings. I'd like Judd to comment on that. I don't think that's enough room to do anything to help soften a 5-story building. And then particularly on the fire lane side, even the buffer was that 10 feet? Can we get anything in a 10-foot buffer to hide a 5-story building or help obscure it? Judd, that was kind of directed at you. Could you make a comment? Yeah, Judd, go ahead.
No. In a word, no. I mean, obviously, when looking at a large building, you want to kind of, especially when you think of those buffers, it's almost easier to front load those and load those towards the property line, because that is the foreground for anybody outside of the site. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be hard pressed to get anything up against the foundation that's going to have any kind of height.
Yeah. I mean that drawing on the bottom left is a dead giveaway for that little dinky green spot right there. Sorry, Judd, didn't mean to cut you off. Keep going.
No, that's the challenge is with the town's buffer requirements. If you go tighter, you go denser, and it's not necessarily. I mean, it still does require you to have a certain number of overstory and understory trees. We can kind of work on, making sure that most all of those are evergreens. I mean, no matter what you plant in the foundation, unless you're planting magnolias, 10 or 12 foot magnolias, you're still gonna have a hard time really bringing down the scale of that building with just plantings. I appreciate the efforts that were done in the buffer itself, and those will come for with final. I mean, there is going to be a treatment there, but we can obviously emphasize, if we'd like them to upsize the material a little bit or just make it all evergreen. I think those would be good courses of action.
What?
Okay.
Can I
Go ahead,
address that?
Steve. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
That was on the east side there, which is the corner where we were talking about the little dinky bush there. It's a little bit deceiving, but we also wanted to show you the worst case. Because that building is not parallel with that property line, and you can sort of see that in the lower right hand plan. It gets much larger than that, but the section is cut in just the corner that's closest to the buffer. So by the time it steps down, I mean, you will have almost a good 15 feet between the building and the fire lane.
Okay.
But there is that one little section in the corner there where it does come fairly close
All right.
for the
Thank you.
foundation plantings. The buffer is consistent all the way down that line.
Yeah. And are there, I've been out to the site, but I didn't look at all the trees. Are there really big 75-foot tall trees in that buffer, like shown on the section?
I'm trying to remember what's in that buffer specifically. There are certainly some trees in that buffer. I don't know that there's any large trees in that buffer.
What's that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if those trees are there, and you fill up where the trunks are, then it makes a case. But I don't know that they're there. So, all right.
I can confirm if you'll give me a second.
Okay.
All right, I got it. There are, down that line, there is a couple of water oaks. There is a 36-inch pine that's right on the property line. There's a 48-inch live oak adjacent to the property line on the other side of the property line. There's a 30-inch pine, a 24-inch pine, and a couple of smaller cherry trees down that buffer.
And that's I got it here too. Yeah, I mean, whichever direction this goes, I'm gonna give everybody one last chance to make any comments. The landscape plan is going to have to be, on steroids. But let's see if anybody else has any follow-up comments. Anybody raise your hand if you want a second round? Add anything? Annette, go ahead.
I think for me, the main issue is the massing. And I guess that's where I'll sort of lean on the rest of the board of whether that's something that we feel comfortable saying as a conditional approval. Because I know we all keep sort of commenting on the massing and because it still reads like a 5-story building. So I just don't know where to go with that because that is the one component that didn't significantly enough change between the last presentation and this one. I guess I'd like to get some thoughts from the rest of the board.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Like I said, I think Steve did a great job with everything, and I think the building looks great. It's just too big. So I would have liked to have seen, a 4-story in some of these areas, because I cannot vote for it as a 5-story building. And if the motion's for a 5-story building, I'm going to vote against it. But but I think it's a nice project. But there has to be, you're right, and that was a big elephant not to get addressed, the height of it. So, and that is in the, I'm looking at the DRB comments. I'm just going to go quickly. Larger setback from the side property lines. They did that. It's 22 feet narrower, according to Steve. Existing vegetation, we'll want to know more about that when this comes back. More articulation of the windows in the pool courtyard facing away from the ocean. Steve, that was from what I remember, there was a big blank wall that had no windows in it. Did that one got covered, right?
Yep. Yeah, it did.
Okay. Yeah. So you took care of that one. So the big one is the next one, the more variation in the height of the roof line, and to mitigate the building height. I still think that needs to be addressed. The HVAC units are on the roof. I saw them on the plan and hidden, which is nice. Additional information on the wetland buffer, and Judd had also brought that up in his comments. A further developed landscape massing plan. The specimen trees we addressed, but that will have to go through BZA approval. And then what we all want to see is the planted tree should be a larger caliper than the minimum requirement to balance the scale of the building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the floor, unless anybody has any final comments.
What if I could, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to mention to speaking to the 4 stories versus 5 stories. We did study dropping the scale of the buildings down in several ways, and it especially towards the end as it stepped down towards the ocean. And we ran into some very tangible, very practical sort of egress concerns in terms of where that egress stair would come into, and not having to have 2 or 3 different sets and dead end corridors on the long end line. So I didn't want you guys to think that we didn't take your comments to heart, because we did study that. And particularly I was trying to step down the building at the hinge point, because I thought that would actually work really well to sort of de-emphasize the scale of the building. And again, we ran into the same sort of very tangible sort of, you still need a 4-story or 5-story egress stair out of some of those portions of the building. So I wanted to mention that.
What if, like I said, what if you didn't shrink that top elevation? What if that was there and the stairs were what they are, and then on the bottom, that next building is a story less, and the building to the right is a story less.
When it comes to this, is there any way that the garage come up, or that the driveway and all that area could come up? Yeah, I think it's just a little flat when it comes down to it.
Mm-hmm.
But hold on one second, John. But getting back to if that
I wanted to make sure
side building.
No, I understand having some low areas. I just want to make sure that there's good.
Wait, who is talking there? Couldn't tell who was talking. Can everybody hear me?
Mr. Chairman, I think that was Judd, but I don't know that he
Okay.
was talking to the group.
Oh, okay. All right. You kind of threw me off. But if the side buildings were 1 story less, you still have the stair there in the corner, correct? Unless I'm missing something.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. I'm afraid that's my stance. But I'm 1 vote of, and there's 5 more. So, but we always run into this voting thing where if it gets voted down, it gets shelved for a year, and we don't want that. We want you to be able to move forward. So the conditions, if someone were to make a motion, I think the conditions would include all of the staff's comments, and they were pretty much echoed by everyone else. But for me to vote for it, would also have to include as an emphasis the massing portion of it, which would be you're going to probably lose 7 units or whatever that number is. So, all right, that's enough beating that dead horse. Anyone like to make a motion?
What happens if there's no motion?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
First of all, I just want to clarify what I think I'm hearing you say, Mr. Ginterman. If we switch to, I don't know, like a site plan or any plan view real quick, is that easy to find? I don't know if you heard me, Chris. I was asking, I'm assuming Chris is in charge of what I'm looking at here. Are we able to switch to a site plan?
Yes, sir. My bad. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Chris is sleeping.
Okay, that's fine.
That-
So the two kind of separate structures that are closest to the ocean, are those the two buildings there that, Michael, you were suggesting to drop those down one floor less? Is that what you were suggesting?
I think everything parallel to the sidelines has to be dropped a story. So it's that whole length.
Okay, not just the two separate buildings closest to the ocean.
Because it's that particularly that main mass that is, for lack of a more creative word, is massive. It's just too massive.
And are we able to switch to sheet RB11? Did we catch you napping again, Chris? Or are we able to switch to RB11?
If you could give me just one quick minute, if you don't
Okay.
mind,
Okay,
please. I'm sorry. Thank you.
that's fine.
So while we're waiting on Chris, I don't know, am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay. I do want to say that I would be remiss if I did not say that while I respect the fact that the scale is a concern with this project, the loss of the top floor may very well push this beyond the point where it would be economically viable. So I know that's not your concern, but I do think it needs to be noted.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're correct. That's not part of the design guideline consideration, performa, and things like that. We're just strictly aesthetics and colors and scale. So, but it's been noted.
While we're waiting on Chris, what would your all's appreciation be for the height and scale of the building if some portions of it eliminated the parking underneath and we kept the same size? We just dropped essentially just dropped the pancake by a story in those locations and lost the parking underneath in some areas. Would that still be perceived as coming down a story?
In my mind, it would. This to me is a 5-story building. It's not 4 plus parking. It's 5 stories. So,
okay.
I really think it needs to be 4. I mean, it's just. I just keep saying the same thing over and over, but it's too close to the sidelines and too tall. If this were a double loaded building that ran straight down the middle, you'd have a lot more distance. You wouldn't have that wonderful pool and all that other stuff, but it would solve that problem. But I know it's not part of your equation here. Chris, are you still there?
Mr. Chairman,
And
this
what
is
I was
Ter-
going to say, I don't necessarily have any divine intervention here. There was that one elevation there where it looks like you brought some of that darker color up to the first floor. And what I was going to kind of throw out to everyone on the board, that I don't know if it's just physically it needs to be less than 5 stories, or visually it just needs to appear less massive. And when we look at right there, RB11, I'm sorry, Chris, on the bottom picture on RB11, you see in the center there how that darker brown color is pulled up a little bit higher. And, if you have a proper landscaping plan that kind of goes along, that it might visually only read as if there's those 3 stories where you see the lighter shade. And I don't know if that would be a happy medium or a compromise that just makes allows the client to get their density. So financially, it all makes sense for them. But at the same time, us as the board, it's something that, visually just doesn't feel so tall and top heavy, for what that's worth.
Annette?
I think for me, the key for me to be able to get behind the massing is really those 2 detached buildings having to come down a story would be my bare minimum, because I do think that on the side elevations, I mean, I still think they are massive, and but those elements, like Mr. Milewski just said, where you're bringing up 1 floor, it does help the massing to me. But without those 2 detached buildings losing 1 floor, it sort of feels like none of the other massing elements or changes have been enough. And trying to be realistic again, I realize we're not factoring in ROI, but that step down of those 2 buildings for me would let me get behind them.
Okay. Anybody else on that train of thought?
I would agree with Annette. I would be on board. That seems like a fair compromise if that's, agreeable.
Okay. Kathy?
I don't know what it would be because I'm not here to solve the issues, but bringing down those 2 front buildings would help a lot. But as John pointed out, bringing up those dark elements to we'll call it the 2nd floor on the side view, maybe on the other 2 elements you could change the roof a little bit or add a balcony or do something. This whole building needs to kind of stop being so massive. I guess we've said it too much.
It's a common word.
Mr. Chairman, this is Chris Darnell with the town.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, thank you for the time. I need to remind you all that they are permitted by right to have, is that 75 foot? A 75-foot building on this site. I understand that there are massing issues, and that you all can work with them to adjust those massing issues, but per the LMO, they are allowed to have that building at 75-foot height.
Okay. Thank you. All right. In that case, then I think the building looks great. So there's nothing really I would change on the architecture or the plan, if that's the trump factor, or excuse me, if that's the deciding factor. So, Okay. All righty. Would anyone like to make a motion? Okay, I'll make a motion then. All right. Okay, here we go. Regarding Mitchellville Lot 11, DRB 001801-2020, motion to approve with the following conditions. All staff comments are added to the, excuse me, added to the NOA as conditions. And those include, and just for reemphasis, that all the wetland setbacks are confirmed, a survey canopy of the specimen trees is provided. Consider additional ways to bring down the scale of the building, including materials or design elements encapsulating, I don't know if that's the right word, the first two floors to break up the massing. It's not a requirement, but an alternate would be appreciated. And applicant to consider 4 stories instead of 5 in any areas possible. Okay. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Judd? Yeah.
I'd recommend the increasing the size of the required buffer materials, and also indicating that overstory and understory trees be evergreen species as efforts to help reduce the scale of the building from outside.
Okay. Thank you. It's very helpful. Annette?
To me, I mean, I know you've said it, that the consideration of reducing a story, to me, it would really be about those 2 detached buildings losing a story for massing sake.
Okay, thank you. All right, I would like to continue my motion with an amendment that the massing considerations primarily focus on the 2 end buildings closest to the water. Consider dropping those a story. And for the landscaping, increasing the size and caliper of all plants and trees, and emphasize the evergreen material. Right, Ms. Foss?
Steve also mentioned the possibility of reducing some of the parking space to drop the floors down. I think that's an excellent option for the main building. That would sort of help break it down.
Okay. All right, I will add another amendment to my motion that while considering massing, look at the possibility of eliminating parking spaces and thus 1 story in certain areas to bring down the scale of the building. Okay.
And finally,
yes, sir.
One more thing, sorry. As an effort with the buffers associated with the side property lines and the wetlands on either end of the building mass, just the preservation of that existing plant material as much as possible, especially the overstory in those buffers and even the understory along the side property lines would help to satisfy those buffer requirements and bring down the scale.
Okay, I think that might be in the staff's comments. Let me see here. Judd, does the staff comment that additional description and specification of the wetland buffer is needed? This area should be as natural as possible, protecting not only trees, but the understory growth. If we include the side setbacks in that, would that cover what you had said? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. All right. To further, I think this may be the last amendment to my motion. As an addition to the staff comment, where additional description and specification of the wetland buffer is needed, this area should be as natural as possible, protecting not only trees, but the understory growth. That comment is also to apply to the left, right, well, all sides, left and right setbacks and the front wetlands and the rear. Okay. All right. It looks like the end of the motion. Would anyone second that? Don't make me repeat it.
I'll second it.
All right. We have a second from Annette. My phones are going haywire. Sorry about that. We have a motion and a second. Ms. Teresa, would you like to call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Miss Lippert,
Yes.
Miss Foss,
Yes.
Mr. Molesky,
Yes.
Mr. Karstens,
Yes.
Mr. Gentleman.
Yes. So passes unanimously. Thanks, Steve, for your patience, and we
Really
look
appreciate
forward
it.
to seeing you.
Thanks, everybody.
Look forward to seeing you soon. All righty. On to new business alteration addition, Shelter Cove railings replacement, DRB 001792-2020.
Mr. Chairman, the Shelter Cove Company is proposing a powder-coated aluminum rail with cables and a grappa wood cap. The existing rail is 30-plus years old and has been maintained to standard but needs to be replaced. The original plan was to re-engineer the existing design to meet the current code requirements. Collins Engineering was hired to redesign the timber rail, but after a section was replaced, the wood warped, creating issues that affect longevity and aesthetics. The solution was a metal rail structure with wooden handrail. The applicant thinks a metal railing is superior to a wood system for the following reasons. Dense timber, which is what the existing rail is made out of, is impossible to supply. 2, the replacement timbers have twisted and cupped. 3, the replacement timber has checked in almost all areas and is already cracking brackets. 4, the cost of timber is more expensive. 5, maintenance and painting is continuous with timber. 6, an aluminum rail has a 5-year warranty on coating and can be repaired. 7, cabling within the aluminum frame does not sag. 8, the grappa wood cap on top of the aluminum rail is cooler in summer compared to wood painted gray. It is naturally resistant to rot, decay, and insect attack, and is scratch resistant, allowing the surface to remain smooth for many years. And 9, an aluminum rail has superior longevity and easily meets load calculations per the IBC. Staff is not opposed to the use of a metal rail and is excited about the use of wood for the handrail. Because this railing is a major part of Shelter Cove Boardwalk, there remains major questions about the railing design and coordination of the railing in the existing streetscape, and that's for lack of a better word, there along the harbor. Staff recommends denial for the following reasons. One, the proposed bronze does not coordinate with the existing pergolas on the bridge and at the Disney Resort. Two, the proposed bronze does not coordinate with the existing benches, planters, trash receptacles, camera poles, and stair rails on the boardwalk. Three, the proposed railing design is two-dimensional and lacks the detail found in the existing rail. And four, no dimensioned details were submitted. The site is outlined in red here. It's pretty much, that outline is pretty much where the railing will go. You see, obviously Shelter Cove Harbor, and then Shelter Cove. Here's the Neptune statue. 278 is out here. If everybody knows, if anybody doesn't know where we are, please signal now. Seeing none. This is a description of where the railing will go. So you'll note the blue line here that indicates all the railing pretty much completely around Shelter Cove Harbor. It's just a picture of the existing railing. You can see it starting to warp up here at the top of the screen. That's looking down in towards the water, so you can see that check that they're talking about through the wood. Here's another picture of the warping that they're talking about. Again, the check and on the old handrail. So this is the proposed handrail. Again, the proposed handrail with the wood top. Now, staff's concern is that this system, the existing railing, complements and works with the existing, again, in quotes, air quotes, streetscape, especially that the pergolas back here and that crossover on the bridge. And I don't know how, staff doesn't know how this railing system relates. It doesn't relate to that structure. I'm sorry, excuse me. That concludes staff's presentation.
All right, thanks, Chris. Applicant will have 10 minutes after introductions. Is the applicant present? Please identify yourself.
Mr. Anderson, I'm sorry, we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, we can.
Go ahead, Dan. Oh, now we can't.
Mr. Anderson, I believe you have yourself muted. If you will unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chairman. I'm Dan Anderson with Barrier Island Marine Contractors.
You want to add anything to Chris's narrative, Dan?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you catch that? Did y'all get any of that?
And did you say a bad word, or was it? We missed that. That's why you muted yourself.
Okay,
No,
I
I
hit the
just
wrong button too. I couldn't hear y'all either. But anyway, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chris, for having us. My name is Dan Anderson with Barrier Island Marine Contractors. So I don't know if you want me to begin or how do you start this off? I'm a little
yeah,
new at
just
this.
yeah. Anything you would like to add or discuss after Chris's narrative? Go ahead. Table
Okay,
floor
I
is
think
yours.
okay, I think Chris nailed it pretty good. The biggest issue we had, we replaced a whole entire section last winter. The town of Hilton Head permitted it for us. We had to bring it up to code. And after we finished the project, a week went by, 2 weeks went by, 3 weeks went by, a month went by, and it started twisting and checking continuously. So at that time, since the whole entire marina railing has to be replaced, we put a stop on it to see if we could correct this problem. After a good bit of study on the material itself, it's very difficult to get dense pine to match existing. The old rail is 30 to 40 years old, so you can imagine that growth of that tree was probably 100 plus years old. It just doesn't twist like it does nowadays. A good example would be some of the town's new signs. If you ride by and look at them next time, you can see where every one of them is checking. It's just a common problem with pine material right now. I don't think there's anything to change on it. It's just we got to live with it. But after spending the money that Shelter Cove Company did, I just was not satisfied with the final results. So we put a stop on it. We came up with a design to replace it with aluminum. The reason we went with bronze was to match some of the new existing areas, some of the buildings around the, I guess it's called Harborside 1 and 2. They have bronze railing. The new signage is bronze. The gates to the marina is bronze. The light posts are bronze. The statue is bronze. And some of the seating is bronze. When it comes to the remainder items, which were outlined, some of the seating and rail, the plan was to paint those bronze also to match the railing. We are in request right now, talking to Disney to see about getting them to change the color of the cupola little area to a bronze also. Some of the comments also, real quick, were about adding some ornamental parts to the railing. That was discussed. And what happens is when you add these ornaments to the existing railing, when you powder coat them, they're very difficult to keep powder coated. That's where you see where it starts to break away. If it's a nice square edge, clean surfaces, the powder coating sticks better and holds better. I don't know if anybody's been on the island for years. You can see some of these old railings where there's a picket and there's an ornament in the middle of it. They always rust, and that's something we don't want to get into. So anyway, some other comments were the rail, the dimension on the top, the garapa. We were using a 1x. We decided to go to a 2x system instead of a 1x to give it a little more beefier look. And then back to the gray coloring, we're trying to match. Slowly, this area is changing to bronze. I think one example is Scott's Fish Market. They've got some stainless steel lighting out there, and I think they're being requested to change it to bronze also. So anyway, the lack of the better terms, that's basically what we're trying to do is get rid of the wood, the inconsistency of the wood, and go to something solid that's going to last another 30 plus years, which would be aluminum. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Dan. If you hang tight in case anybody has any questions for you.
Certainly.
We're gonna run through the board here. Chris, a question for you before we get started.
Yes, sir.
Does staff have any negativity or aversion towards the aluminum material itself? I didn't read that into your comments. It's not the material, right?
It's not the material. You're correct. It's
okay.
And Mr. Chairman, it's not even the color. It's the color with that's going to be placed in this gray environment, for lack of a better word. That pergola all around there is gray, and it coordinates in material and detail to the railing. So we're going to be placing. The request is to place this railing that is, I think, a different design, and will stand out from the rest of the scape, the streetscape or dockscape, whatever you want to call it, around the harbor. But yeah, there is no opposition to the metal at all. It's just the design.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Let's go through the board. Mr. McAllister?
All right. Yeah, overall, I think it's a great project. I think looking forward to seeing some of these improvements get made. One quick question up front for the applicant. Is the intent to, I guess, mount this directly onto the fascia, the outside of the boardwalk? And is that fascia going to get replaced, or is it going to be existing? Just kind of curious what that looks like.
It's going to be bolted to the outside of the, it's an existing board that has to be replaced with a 6x10, and that'll be bolted to that. That was the kind of a part of the engineering side of it. If we didn't have the 6x, you were not going to meet the code, which the loads are a lot higher than they were back then, if the railing was even to code back then. Right. So that was that's part of the internal design, is that 6x at the very bottom of it.
Okay. Yeah, one of the observations I had, assumed that board was probably going to get replaced. And I kind of am in agreement with staff on the color of the rail. I think, as it stands by itself right there, I think that looks really nice. But I do think that, if it were gray, that could kind of pull it all together. So I don't know how difficult it is to do a different powder coat color. I'm not opposed to the design of it, like what you're showing. I like it how it is. I think staff made an observation that that middle rail, the horizontal rail, feels a little heavy, and I kind of agree with that comment. And I don't know if that horizontal rail's there for like structural support or the integrity of the handrail. This is just my opinion, but I would almost think that it would look better without that horizontal rail, but I may be alone in that thought. But my biggest thing is I do think the color would probably look a little better gray, and just knowing that you're going to replace that board on the outside, it's already gray. A lot of the dock components are gray. I just think it's an opportunity to kind of tie it all in. But that being said, I think it does look nice as is. But those are my initial comments.
All right. Thanks, David. Mr. Karstens?
I echo Mr. McAllister's comments in regards to, I wanted to confirm that was going to be mounted on the fascia as the current one is. Obviously, that example that's being shown to us has the mounting towards us, which won't be the case. That'll all be hidden. The proposed, if you go to the proposed image, Chris. So yeah, that mounting across the bottom will be on the opposite side, more hidden. I'm also with David in regards to the potential for the design. I just looked at the railing that was done at Shelter Cove Town Center, and granted that's timber, but it has pretty much posts with a heavy rail and then almost a horizontal piece underneath the rail. So it's more about that top line and then the verticals and tying into the deck that it is associated with. So, I know the current design out there at the harbor has that middle rail. So either I would say reduce the scale of that middle horizontal piece, like David mentioned, or there can be the potential of eliminating it completely. As was done with the Shelter Cove Town Center. So. That is all.
Okay. Thanks, Jed. Ms. Lippert.
I agree with all the comments that have been made. I think it's that the lack of articulation that everybody is, and sort of two-dimensionality and flatness that everybody's talking about, to me also stems from the fact that the verticals and the horizontals are the same dimension. If that horizontal were skinnier in its vertical dimension, I think it would help, only because it is overpowering relative to the handrail. To me, the lack of details being submitted make it really hard to also judge all the anomaly conditions. There are a lot of them. The current rails go between sort of joists of the boardwalk and are mounted to that in a lot of conditions. You have a lot of, like in this, I'm seeing one section that's been powder coated and one finished. What's the connection from one section to the next section? What happens when you have an interior corner and it becomes double posts because they're already feeling heavy and they're going to feel even heavier? How do all of those connections really get made? So in that sense, the lack of details, in addition to the two-dimensionality because of horizontal and vertical being the same dimension, are the biggest concerns for me. I agree with the color as far as, actually I'm going to say the color is a struggle for me, because right now the light poles and the gates onto the docks feel out of place. And I guess what I'm struggling with is, does one then agree something that was put in that feels out of place, now we retrospectively try to make it match? I'm struggling with that one. So I'll see what some of the other board members have to say, because otherwise I also tend to think gray. That's all.
Sorry. Thanks, Annette. And Mr. Molesky.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, a lot of my notes I had are very similar to what's already been said, and without necessarily reiterating it, but I guess I'll reiterate. But I wanted to ask, with the, we'll call it a 4x4 vertical post. I mean, I see this as an opportunity just to kind of throw out the existing design. I don't see any reason to try to mimic that old wood rail. Here's an opportunity to kind of make things feel more current, as I'm sure everybody would like to see, and maybe having the spacing on those 4x4 verticals every 4 feet, maybe eliminate every other one and have them be, every 8 feet or something like that, just to visually do away with that. I mean, we all talk structurally here, but it's not like it's supporting any great load that the aluminum has to be every 4 feet on center. And then the same thing with that ferocious horizontal element going through there, which just doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, maybe reduce that to 2x4, drop that all the way down to the bottom, or do away with it altogether, I think would help a lot. I definitely like how that the wooden handrail looks good. It softens things up, it breaks things up, it makes it feel more current. But that would be my comment. Drop that middle rail down to the bottom, make it something less, eliminate every other vertical element. I'm indifferent on the bronze versus the gray. If the whole look of that Shelter Cove is trending towards bronze, I don't see any need to paint it gray now, only to be in front of us again a year from now to submit to repaint everything bronze. Anyway, those are my comments. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Ms. Foss?
Okay, keep this picture up, Chris. The last one you just had. Hello, Chris. There, thank you. If you look across the harbor there, the gray just kind of blends in with the water and the boats. And the bronze, even though this is front on picture, bronze just stands out. Even the light post to the right of the picture stands out. So I think it's a really good idea to bring back the gray and keep the gray. If everyone else agrees that the bronze is okay, then I would suggest that we would have to get the okay from Disney and the rest of Shelter Cove people to paint their benches to match, and then I think it would be overwhelming. I think it would be too much bronze and not enough just blending in with the environment. The comments about that middle rail being too heavy, I agree with. I think that's those are great comments. If there was a way to bring, I don't know, the old rail is kind of nautical. If there was a way to bring in a bit more nautical-ish, I don't know if you can do that. I know that Mr. Anderson said that adding a detail to those elements kind of brings on rust and makes it hard to repair. But if there was a way to look at making that a little bit more nautical, that would be appreciated for me. Let's see. I agree we need some more dimensions. John brought up a good thought. If we could increase the spacing, I don't know. I don't know the code and I don't know the restrictions of those railings. I'm checking, sorry. And I actually, if you did the metal railings and had them in the gray color, I don't know if there's a powder coat color that's close to those, kept the wood, and then the benches and Disney's side of that property can take their time in upgrading to match. And if everything was gray, I think we'd be on the good side. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kathy. Yeah, I think we might be overthinking it a little bit. I think that the heavy, well, I mean, the new rail is literally a copycat of the old rail minus little haunches that are in between. So the heavy rail is what we have on the old rail. But the big difference here, I think, is the top rail on the old rail is heavier than this one. At least it appears to be. If there's a picture of the two of them side by, I mean, that cap looks a little more balanced with that middle rail. I do not have a problem with the current design. I think it's simple. I think it's nautical in the use of the cable rails, which you see in a lot of nautical architecture. I do agree with the color. I think it probably should be the gray and not the bronze. But I think the design of the rail is fine if there was maybe a little bit heavier piece at the cap. And that could be the cap sitting on a little thicker piece of aluminum or something like that. But I think it's fine. The spacing I think is okay because you don't want to space the cable rails really more than 4 feet apart, or they will sag no matter how much you tension them. Because people put their foot on them, people step on them, they will sag over time, and then they'll look bad. So the spacing I think is appropriate. Dan, is the rail 42 inches high when it's installed? Do you know?
Yes, it has to be brought up to code to 42. The remainder's
Okay.
not. It's still at 36. And if you look at the pictures that were there with the existing railing, that's actually the new rail with the cables in it. Yeah, that is the new rail. That's not the old rail. That's the new rail that the town required us to put the cabling in it to meet the code. And then also the reason it's spread 5 foot on center, 4 foot on center is because of the load. There was a lot of thought into when they used to shoot the fireworks before the COVID, all the people that would pile on these railings. So they were really worried about, overbuilding it than underbuilding it in that particular instance.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fine with the spacing of the stanchions, especially since it's all cable rail in the middle. So that leaves it open.
Yeah.
So I would be fine with it as is, but go to the gray. Just Miss Foss made the best comment, I think, that you look at the picture and it just kind of goes away, among the boats and everything else. That would be the direction I would go. And we really do need to see a drawing to get final approval on this. So
Just since this is a meeting, maybe it's better I just withdraw it at this time
Yeah, that's
and
going to be
come
my
back,
suggestion.
and we'll take your comments in consideration and see if we can come up with a design.
Okay, but
For the
before you
next meeting.
leave, before you leave, let's see if anybody else has any follow-up, just so you have everybody's brain totally cleaned out here, so you know what to come back with. Annette?
I guess I just don't know, what is the current post spacing in this sample?
Sorry? That's
What's the spacing of the posts in this sample piece?
Well, the spacing of the post is technically through the engineer, and that's where the load is. If they spread it out any further, there's no
But
support
what's
to
the
hold it.
number?
Sorry?
Where are we at right now? Is that 2'6"? Is that 4
4
feet? I just can't tell from the photo.
4 foot. 4 foot. I mean, they might be able to re-engineer it to give it more spacing at 5 foot on center or even 6 foot, but I don't think so with the load of people during the fireworks display and all that.
Yeah, I couldn't tell. It could have been 2 feet. I just couldn't tell off of the
Okay.
photo
Right.
what the spacing was, so I was just trying to visualize it.
Right.
So I appreciate that answer.
In the middle rail was copied off the existing, which if we could take that out, put it at the bottom and beef up the top, that will work also. So basically we would be adding another cable also instead of having that 4x4 in the middle.
Well, I think that's where Mr. Molesky's comment was very good. We're switching materials. Why are we trying to copy the former railing? If we're going to a new material, which I think the entire board and staff are open to, then the details shouldn't be a direct copy off of what used to be wood.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
And just for clarification, there will be no remaining old rail anywhere, right, Dan?
It's going to be a process, as you can imagine, to the budget. This is a huge project, and phase 1, which is what was completed, which we would go back and rip out and redo with aluminum. Phase 2 was basically from the middle of the harbor, where, if anybody's familiar with it, Captain Hook sits, the boat, all the way to the Disney Bridge, and then next year the Disney section. Yeah, it's just not feasible per budget-wise to do it all in 1 year.
Okay, so on your submittal, even if it's that plan marked up and some of those lines are red and the red lines are phase 1 and the blue lines are phase 2, can you make sure we know what's what for our consideration?
Yes.
And then we'll also need a scale drawing with dimensions of a 12-foot section of this. And from what I'm gathering from everyone, if you took that heavy middle rail and raised it up to the top and replaced that rail with a cable, painted it in gray, I'm pretty sure you could get that passed. Anyone disagree with that comment? Ms. Voss, go ahead.
I don't think if that middle rail got moved up to the top, it needs to be that big. It should be probably half the height. If that's a 4x4, maybe it's a 2x4.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the reason that, and I agree that you copied what was existing, but the reason the existing middle rail kind of works is that it's got some carving out and it has a little bit of curve to it where it meets the vertical post and narrows down a little bit. If you can't do that, then I agree. Just take it away, move the little narrow piece up to the top and do something at the bottom. But it's up to you to figure out if people are going to be able to climb up on those things. Thanks.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Molesky?
And not to play designer here, but if we were to change those vertical components to every 8 feet, I believe that in the interim, every 4 feet, there's approximately a 1 inch in diameter stainless steel spacer that could go in there to keep the cables from sagging and all that kind of good stuff. And I'm sure from an engineering point of view, directly underneath the grappa rail, they could put some type of quarter inch or half inch, that's what would provide the structural integrity, and then the grappa would just more or less be aesthetic. And anyway, the reason I say all that is, to me, that is more in keeping with more of a current railing design, instead of trying to, again, just copy something that was done, whatever, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But thanks for listening.
All right, let me be a devil's advocate on your designer hat there. The wider you make the spaces between them, and you expect that to be your normal, if we do not have a normal length of fence, then you're going to get some that are 8 feet, 8 feet, 8 feet, and then you're going to get one that's like 5 feet, and another that's 2 feet, and another that's 3 feet. If you have smaller spacings, it can accommodate more odd conditions. So the difference between one that has to be 3, because that's what the corner dictates, and there's a 4 next to it's going to look a lot less odd than a 3 and an 8 and an 8 and an 8, and then you got to throw in a 2 there to get around this end. So I think the more frequent the stanchions, the better. I wouldn't do them less than 4, but I think 4 is a good number. It'll give you a slightly horizontal rail since it's 42 inches high. I wouldn't make them more than 4, certainly not more than 5, because then you're gonna, and again, the cables will sag unless you put the little thing in the middle, but then again, that next bay may not be that convenient that you have 8 feet to work with. So, yes, Ms. Foss.
Sorry, great point, Michael. Given that that's going to be like a 2-year span of them spacing it out, matching the span of the post to the new and the existing, I think will make it look a lot better anyway.
Yeah, and if they're the same color, it'll be less noticeable during this phasing. So, okay, so Dan, let me give you one last wrap up. Approximately 4 feet spacing, whatever. Work on that. Give us a plan that shows the phasing. Give us a detailed, like a shop drawing or something of the actual rail. Take out the heavy middle rail, move it up, and cut it in half. Instead of a 4x4, make it a 2x4.
Okay.
And everybody likes the wood cap.
Okay.
Anybody
Yes.
not good with that, raise your hand and we'll send Dan on his way. All right, Dan, now that the conversation's over, could you make a formal withdrawal, please?
Yes, I'd like to withdraw at this time. Our application.
Chris, do you have anything to add?
No, sir. No, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody else aboard too.
Bye. See you later. All right, let's see here. Okay, here we go. Sorry. Next item, Schooner Court 709, Unit 709, DRB 001793-2020. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This project will add a third floor to the existing 2-story townhouse at 709 Schooner Court in Harbortown. Several other units within Schooner Court development have successfully added a third story to their existing townhouses, and this renovation follows their example. The architecture is designed to match and blend with the existing buildings. The materials and windows will match the existing in type, size, style, and color. The stucco will be painted to match the new regime color scheme when approved by the DRB, which was approved by the DRB. Staff recommends approval with the following conditions. Specify the window frame color to match the existing window frames. To clarify, I read it in the narrative, or it was in the narrative, but it was not on the drawings. So I want that specification to be on the drawings that the windows will match. And 2, specify the shutter to match existing. And 3, specify the roof to match. The site is outlined in red on your screen. You can see directly below that is Harbor Town, the iconic shape, and Lighthouse Road is coming in, sort of meandering across the middle of the screen. If anybody doesn't know where we are, please let me know right now. Seeing none, this is an aerial of the proposed. I believe the unit is right here. It's this unit right here. We'll get a better look at it later. Again, it would be the unit right here. Just an example of the 3 stories in this development compared to the 2, and there's 2. Just 2-story here, going to 3 and 2. I'm sorry, let me back up here. I believe this is the picture of the unit in question right here. So this is the unit. Again, you can see Lighthouse Road. There's the proposed floor plan, wall sections, the existing conditions, and what's proposed. So this is the existing front and side, the Lighthouse Road side, and what you would see once it's complete. The back side of the building and the opposite side, or the back and the opposite side, and what it would look like once complete. An illustration of the building with vegetation. Again, we're standing in Lighthouse Road looking at it. That's the front side, parking lot side, and the water side. Sort of a bird's eye view. Again, the parking lot is in the foreground. And another shot of the back. Front. And that's it. Again, staff recommends approval with the conditions stated.
Chris, question for you before you leave us. These are the same units as the color change, right, from last time?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. And I think that was only, okay. So when you say window frame to match existing window frames, shutter to match existing, that's going to all be per the new approved color scheme, correct?
Yes, sir. That is the thought process.
Okay, I just didn't know if we needed to specifically state that in a motion, which I think we should, that it will match the new approved color scheme. Does that sound like a good idea to you?
Yes, sir. Staff loves clarity.
Okay. Be specific. All right. Is the applicant present?
Is Steve on?
Yeah.
I'm here.
We get Steve again?
Yep.
All right.
I'm here.
All right.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, we can hear you, Steve. So you know how this works. You have 10 minutes. Would you like to add anything to Chris's narrative?
No, the only thing I would add is that the local regime was very clear that they wanted it to match the existing units as closely as possible. So, and we also tried to take our lead from several other projects that have already done this exact renovation. So most of the architecture you're going to see matches what's there and what has been done previously.
Okay, so what?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry. There's a point that I missed. This is pending approval from Sea-Pines ARB. It's my understanding that it's in front of Sea-Pines ARB as we speak, but per the LMO, we need to get a determination from an ARB prior to your all's review. So this is moving forward as for comment and courtesy to assist Steve with design so that he can move forward with that, and we'll be coming back for final approval.
Oh, so this is not a final.
No, sir. This is a get the comments
Okay.
review.
All right. So we don't even have to do a motion or anything then. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. All right. Sounds good. Then I'm sorry, Steve, were you finished?
I am completed. Thank you.
Okay. Just hang around. Let's run through the group here. Mr. McAllister, you're first.
All right. Overall, I think it looks great. The only question I had was regarding shutters. It looked like there were maybe the side elevation and the rear elevation. The new windows didn't have shutters. So I was just curious if there was any plan to provide shutters there. It looked like most of the windows and all the units had shutters on the second and third floor. So I was just curious about that.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, Steve, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. Yeah, if someone asks you a question, you are free to respond.
Certainly. So the only ones that we're we don't have the shutters on are these two windows on the sort of the back corners. One is directly above a sliding door, so we're trying to match the same size and proportion as that sliding door, which will not allow a shutter. But the regime wanted us to match that size and scale configuration as best as possible. Then on the side window, on this exhibit you're looking at right here, we're trying to make, that's the window that faces the water, and we would like to make that a larger window. And that forces us to have an awkward shutter condition, and we would rather just forego the shutters, make the massing match the lower element so that we could get a little bit more glazing on that critical elevation.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. And I was just curious about that. But other than that, I think it looks good. No other comment.
Thank you, David. Mr. Karstens.
I don't have, at this point, I don't have any additional comment.
Thank you. You win the brevity award for the day. Ms. Lippert.
Chris, if you could go to the Lighthouse Road elevation. Thank you. Sorry, yes, proposed. Because to me, this unit is unique in that it's parallel to the road. And because of that, I would like to see some articulation on that blank wall. Everything else I'm fine with. I think it does a good job of matching what the other ones have done. And the only other question I have to Steve is, and I know we're not reviewing this, but it affects the aesthetics. Have all the firewall conditions already been addressed as far as whether something has to get extended, or are you just doing it horizontally? I know you can do firewalls horizontally 4 feet, but it might affect the adjacent units. So I'm just asking if there's anything on the elevations that might change due to the firewall of the raised story.
Yeah, I would think, let me take the two. So the firewall, we believe we have taken that into account on all sides, because we're a higher roof line than our adjacent units. So that firewall does carry on. The other side, and it is a two-sided firewall, as you would imagine. On the Lighthouse Road side, it's our owner's strong desire not to have windows on that facade, simply because there's a hotel that directly faces that and so if they do have windows, they're going to be closed all the time just for privacy's sake. So it would be a window just for the sake of the exterior. So we're proposing it this way because it's to avoid having a window that really serves no function.
But that's why I specifically say articulation. I'm not saying that it needs to be a window. I just think it is a very large flat surface. and again, because this unit is unique, because it's parallel to that Lighthouse Road, I don't know, I'm trying to shy away from giving you specifics, but I mean, whether it is just a stucco trim that breaks up that facade that is in the plane of where a window would be. I'm not saying it has to be a window. I'm just saying it is a awfully long, large facade that is dead flat with zero articulation.
Understood. I understand completely.
That's all I had.
Okay, thanks, Annette. Mr. Molesky.
I'm going to say ditto to exactly what Annette said. I feel the same way. And again, with all the exposure on Lighthouse Road, I understand where you're coming from as a builder. I'm not a fan of just putting in a fake looking window that doesn't work, but I think that elevation needs something, whether you have shutters that appear to be shut all the time or just something just to break that up. I think there's just too much. I'm assuming that's stucco, too much stucco just there glaring out, whether it's at Lighthouse Road or like you alluded to, the units that are above that would be staring at this building, that's what they get to look at. So I think something better could be done there. Thanks.
All right, thank you, John. Ms. Foss.
I am going to mirror Annette and John's comments on the Lighthouse Road side. Who cares if you have a window and you have to keep the drapes shut all the time? Seriously, I mean, I don't like fake shutters. I don't like fake trim on anything. But I think that wall definitely needs to be broken up. David brought up a good point about that one window being above the other one and not having shutters. I understand the issue of wanting more light in the space, but we already had comments when this project first came above us that there was so much going on with all the canopies and different balconies and the different fences and such. I would like to see more standards brought into this. And if you've got a window, it needs shutters, in my opinion. That's what has already been brought up. I also agree with staff's comments that the windows and the shutters and the approved color schemes need to be matched. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Kathy. All right. Annette, could you put that elevation back up, Chris? It was just up there. The right side and the rear, I believe. Yes. Okay. Yes, everyone's comments continue to progress, and I agree with all of them. With Annette doing a lot of the heavy work there. The window on the right side elevation relates more to the one below it than the one on the rear. So I don't see why those would need to match, meaning the two that have the arrows next to them. I think that window needs to match the one below it with the shutters, which I believe is what Kathy's point was. And then on left side elevation, you go to that one. Yep, right there. Total agreement with everyone. Third floor needs to have windows. I know they don't want the hotel across the street to look at them, but they already have windows on that side. So I think we need windows that fit the pattern of what's there. And then one of my personal pet peeves is shutters that don't fit the window, which would be the window to the right on the left side elevation, the double window. I would either do no shutters because that's more like a door than a window, or do appropriate size shutters. And then they would be different from the other one. So I just probably leave shutters off of that one if that's the size of the window. And then the third floor windows, whether there's two of them or three of them, they should appropriately align with that elevation because it is very prominent on Lighthouse Road, and it actually sticks up above the privacy wall and the landscaping. So you're going to see that. And I think that was pretty a universal comment that there needed to be something up there. But I would go the full step and go windows and not try to do fake shutters or anything like that. And Chris, would you like to add anything?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Steve, any replies or questions on your end?
One thing I would want to bring to is Chris, if you could show that 3D view, and I don't know if you have I sent you a photo of the existing landscape condition along that Lighthouse Road, but that'll work right there. There is a very large tree on that side of the building. So the windows that we're talking about adding on that third floor are really not very visible at all. I tried to, for this rendering here, I did try to match that tree as closely. You really cannot see that third floor from this perspective. So I did want to add that to the discussion.
Well, that'll give them more privacy than from the hotel. So. Yeah, I don't think they're going to win that argument with us.
Okay.
I think we're going to need something there. And I think it's the right answer. That something just needs to be there. Annette, you have your finger up.
Yeah, and just to explain that, I mean, I don't think we can count on a tree. I mean, all we need is a storm or that tree to get thick and it's gone, and now we have this massively exposed facade. So I think we have to think of it in terms of the tree could disappear.
Yeah, and that's pretty much a DRB staple there, that you can't rely on the landscape. So, all right. So, Chris, do I just table this, or do we need a formal withdrawal? What do we need to do here, procedure-wise?
If the board will entertain a table, then you can table it. Otherwise, the applicant will need to withdraw. And just to remind you that if he withdraws, if the applicant withdraws, he essentially just loses his application fee. With the table, you can preserve the application fee.
All right, we'll do Steve a favor and we'll table this so he can save his application fee. Okay, I would just like to make sure to reemphasize that we are tabling this pending the outcome of the Sea Pines ARB review. Would someone like to make a motion? Manette, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
I'll make the motion that we table this pending Sea Pines ARB review and recommend that the applicant has heard our comments.
All right, and that is for the record, Schooner Court 709 DRB 001793-2020. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a second from Ms. Foss. Any further discussion? All right, Ms. Teresa, would you call roll, please?
Certainly. Ms. Lippert,
Yes.
Ms. Foss,
Yes.
Mr. McAllister,
Yes.
Mr. Molesky, Mr. Karstens,
Yes.
Mr. Gentleman.
Yes, so we have a unanimous vote to table this. So we'll see you again, Steve, soon.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Okay, next, new development, conceptual. William Hilton Parkway Self-Storage, DRB 001794-2020. And Mr. Karstens will be recusing himself from this project.
Yes, sir.
And Chris, would you like to take it from here?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This project proposes to redevelop the 2.3-acre former Graco hardware property on William Hilton Parkway into a multi-story, climate-controlled self-storage campus. The site contains 2 specimen trees and 4 significant trees. There is a 20-foot side building setback and 50-foot setback off William Hilton Parkway, along with a 20-foot setback off of Dunnigan's Alley. A 50-foot front buffer will put the building mass behind the existing tree canopy and provide room for additional planting areas. Specimen and significant trees will have town-mandated 15-foot tree protection zones around the trunk. The placement of proposed buildings and parking uses existing impervious areas left vacant by the demolition of the existing building and asphalt. The proposed redevelopment impervious coverage will be less than the existing site impervious coverage and below the LC, light commercial that is, district, which allows 60% total impervious area. The existing underground detention will be used and expanded as necessary. The project will reduce the curb cut access points on William Hilton Parkway down to 2, from 2 down to 1, and maintain the Dunnigan's Alley curb cut for vehicular circulation. The driveway will be improved to accommodate moving trucks. Staff has concerns about the direction of this development. The architecture is not in keeping with island character, and the site plan could better address building layout and trees. These issues are significant enough that staff recommends denial of this conceptual application. The site is outlined in red on your screen. Below it is William Hilton Parkway. You can see Dunnigan's Alley running in the back with the traffic circle down here at the intersection of Dunnigan's and Arrow. It's also important to note that there is a power line easement running along Dunnigan's Alley, which limits vegetation to 12-foot height. Does everybody know where we are? And if you don't, please raise your hand and let me know. Seeing none, we're moving on. This is the proposed survey. You can see the canopy of the specimen trees identified. Again, the existing conditions. This is the adjacent, it's now Goodwill that was recently redone. And Panera is on the other side of the site, and this is the site. So this building will be demoed. Again, that's an aerial of the existing building with the specimen and significant trees identified. This is the proposed layout. So the multi-story building is the larger square here, and this would be a single-story building here. 278 is out here, and Dunnigan's Alley is back here. Floor plan for the multi-story storage unit building. Elevations of that building. Elevations of that linear building opposite the drive aisle from the multi-story building. And sort of a perspective of that proposed building. That concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chris. All right, the applicant will have a 10-minute timer. After introductions, I see Mr. Whitmer. If there's any, whoever will be speaking, if you would please introduce yourselves up front, and then whoever can take over and add to Chris's narrative.
Sure. Brian Whitmer with Whitmer Jones Kiefer. We're the planners, landscape architects, and Eddie Buck is here. He'll probably speak as well. And I'll go first. As far as,
Brian, let me interrupt.
Yeah.
I don't see the
Sure.
architect. I don't see the architect online, FYI, on the meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Well, Mr. Buck can probably answer some of the architectural questions if Tony is not with us. I'll speak to the site and the landscape. Looking at staff comments under natural resources and miscellaneous comments, I think we can work with most of the comments that were made. We had a comment about adding bollards around some of the significant trees. We can do that. We have worked around the significant specimen trees on the site plan, and we can continue to refine the plan a bit to make sure we save those. Other comments we had was to add a site analysis plan. We can do that. We had one in place, but we can add to it and better define that. Adjust the alignment to Dunnigan's Alley. I think we can make that site plan adjustment to better align the rear road, rear access to Dunnigan's Alley. I don't see any problem with that. And then there's some comments about refining the perimeter fence, and I think we can make those adjustments as well as far as modifying the location. There's also a comment to add more landscape on the entry drive on Dunnigan's Alley, and I think that's addressable too. We'd be happy to do that. So just walking through the site plan comments and landscape comments, I understand staff comments, and I think those are comments that we'd be happy to make those refinements too. On that, I'm going to let Mr. Buck talk about if he wants to talk any about architecture or any other items before we go through comments.
Thanks, Brian. Mr. Buck, I think you might be muted.
Hey. Hey, Brian, this is Ryan Lyle. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. This is Ryan Lyle, Andrews Engineering. The architect couldn't be on the phone today, so I'm merely a civil engineer, but we did collaborate with the architect and tried to meet some of the goals of the town. So if just to speak regarding the site plan that we coordinated with Whitmer Jones Kiefer, the building placement, I did want to bring up to the board that we are proposing the phase 1 building. That's the large structure, and we do plan to phase this. Phase 2 would be the longer, more narrow single-story building on the northern property line. The fencing, we're proposing a wooden fence, board on board, and as far as the architecture goes, we have given a water table, or accentuating the first floor with brick, and really trying to pull out the front facade that addresses William Hilton Parkway and the office space with storefront windows. So on that, there's the east elevation, maybe shows it best, and the south elevation that fronts the William Hilton Parkway. That's our main office entry. Currently, the site is below flood, and we'd have to elevate the base. We'll elevate the first floor to meet base flood elevation, so raising roughly 30 inches high. That's why you see a switchback ADA ramp with handrails. And so the office door would be on that storefront, and we thought it looked most appropriate to add the storefront windows all the way on the second and third floors. This is a climate-controlled self-storage facility, therefore, not a ton of windows, but this seemed appropriate and aesthetically pleasing. at least to us. And as far as we initially started with a 4-story concept, that felt overwhelming, even though I think it fell within the maximum height. It just seemed too big for the site. So reducing the overall height to a to a 3-story on phase 1 and a single story on phase 2 seemed to fit the character of the surroundings, because across William Hilton there's 2 and 3-story buildings, and 4 may have been just a little too much. We did introduce brick on the bottom and horizontally and vertically arranged wall panels with punch outs for some windows alongside, and would just like to hear comments from the board.
All right, thank you very much. If you guys would just hang tight in case anybody has any questions for you, we'll start with Mr. McAllister.
All right. First of all, just I'll go ahead and say I'm probably going to focus more on site stuff since I'm the only landscape architect who's going to be reviewing it today. In general, I'm in agreement with a lot of staff comments related to the building. I think my biggest comment would be related to the roof line and maybe trying to see if there's something you could do to break up the roof a little bit and have a little more architectural detail on that 278 facade. But I'm sure we'll get more input from the board on the architecture. Just moving to the site. As a general comment, to me, it feels like there's a lot of pavement here. And I know that you guys said that there's going to be less impervious than there was previously, which I certainly appreciate. But there's some stuff that it feels a little excessive to me. And maybe you can provide a little clarification on what the intent is behind some of the space and the thought process. For example, looking at our 3 specimen trees in the back, which I'd certainly appreciate you guys working around. But to me, that pavement edge, it looks like it's basically just following that 15-foot minimum, clearance zone from the tree since it's a specimen. And I just didn't really, it kind of seems like dead space to me. I understand that some of this area is going to be used as outdoor storage. But to me, not understanding why you would pave it in that shape, it seems like that might be an opportunity to give those nice specimen trees a little bit of breathing room. So that's kind of my comment for that space. And I realize that this is outdoor storage, and maybe Chris can chime in, but I know that there are some minimum or maximum requirements for paved surfaces. And I'm not sure how this falls into that, but just something to consider. And then the gravel parking to the left of that, again, it feels like there's like kind of some dead spaces that really aren't that usable, like the parking space at the very top closest to the fence. I don't think you could park a car there and back out without hitting the fence. So I would like to see a landscape island, which is, kind of a code requirement at the ends of parking. And then moving plan south down to where we're proposing to remove, I think there's like 2 trees. There's a laurel oak and a live oak. In my mind, I think there's an opportunity there to cut the paving out a little bit there and save those trees. I think that would just help kind of screen the backside of the building a little bit more. And if for whatever reason you couldn't keep those trees, I would still want to see, landscape island per code. And, I realize there's a overhead utility easement there, so you may be limited on what you could replant, but, there's existing trees there. I would like to see them saved if possible. I realize that you don't have to do buffers on this project based on, the adjacent use zoning and all, so I do appreciate the effort and consideration of your neighbors here to screen. In general, at final, I would probably be looking to see more evergreen stuff, just more screening plant material along the buffers. And then moving up to the parking, that's just to the left of the Phase 2 building. I know it's labeled as parking, but I kind of question what the intent really is there, because it's, almost double the length of a parking stall. So if it's truly parking, I would want to see, again, like a little bump out to put some planting on the left side of the Phase 2 building, so there's a little separation between the parking and the building. I think that would also protect your building as well if you do have people parking there. And then just, I think it should be, the 18-foot depth of parking, that area. I realize it's an impervious material, but it just seems a little excessive in terms of the depth of the paving. Let's see. And then I think the same would hold true to the left of that, providing a little area for planting up by the fence. And then as far as the fence, could the applicant give a little clarification on like where it is and whether it's a solid fence that's screening or what kind of how that works out?
Yes, we're proposing the fence be located roughly 5 feet off of the property line on the north, and landscape would be on the outside of the fence. It would be opaque. It would be wooden, not seen through, probably at least 6 feet tall.
Okay.
The goal for the Phase 2 area during Phase 1 would be boat storage. So that entire length where the Phase 2 building sits and the gravel parking to the west of it would be boat storage. So
I see.
30 some odd foot trailer length from tongue to tip of motor. That's the goal. They'd be parked on an angle down that row, down that drive aisle.
Okay. So it's not intended for vehicular then. That was really my question.
No, sir. We see trucks and, boat trailers and other, just trailer storage that's needed on the island. And so all this would be screened. So the parking and landscape islands internally, we understand preserving the specimen trees, but adding landscape islands in the boat storage, we just like to minimize that if all possible, just to maximize the amount of storage space we could accommodate. We fall way, well, I say way below, 5% below the town 60%. So I think we're sitting at 55% impervious today.
Okay. I appreciate it.
I think we'd rather add landscaping here.
Sorry?
I think on this type project, we'd rather add some additional landscape on the perimeter to kind of screen it on the sides. That you can kind of see how that was reflected in the landscape plan, but that's where I think it makes sense to have a little bit more.
This is Chris, a little bit of going back to the LMO, that 6-foot fence has to be outside of the setback, the building setback.
So if we want to be, we'd have to be 4 feet if we stay where it's at, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So I think that's an adjustment we'll either, if we need to maintain 6, we'll move it back. We have to move it back. If 4 is acceptable, we can keep it where it is. So that's, that's a decision we need to make. I understand that. Yeah, understand the comment.
The other thing that we need some clarification on is if that is outdoor storage. There is, if I remember correctly, in the LMO, there's a requirement that the screen fence has to be as tall as the material that's stored. I'm going to ask Nicole Dixon, if she's still on the line, if she can, still on the meeting, if she can chime in on that requirement.
Thanks, Chris. If you give me a minute, I'll look that up. Hold on one second.
Okay, I think if we can give Nicole a minute, but we can continue on, but I just want to confirm that.
Okay. Well, I'll reserve my comment on, as far as the fence until we see what Nicole says. In general, I want it to at least screen, whatever's back there, and I'd kind of question whether or not a 4-foot fence could achieve that. But anyways, so let's see. I think those are most of my site-related comments that I had for this first round. So I will let someone else chime in now.
Okay, thanks, David. Ms. Lippert.
Chris, could you remind me what foundation planting requirements exist in the guidelines?
There are no requirements for foundation planting. It's what you, meaning you, the DRB, will require.
Okay, thank you. With regard to the building, I think the key elements that I very strongly agree with staff reviews on is it is a very flat facade that does not incorporate the vernacular of the architecture of the island and does not address pedestrian interaction. And you have to the right and left two buildings, well, to the right, the Panera sort of plaza that has several other businesses, restaurants, printing facilities, with high pedestrian traffic patterns happening there. And to the left, the Goodwill, also again, high pedestrian traffic, and that is not being addressed by this architecture. And there are no sloped roofs, no brackets. Again, I'm really just reiterating what staff has already commented on, and I agree. It's a very flat facade. There's no undulation ins and outs to speak of. And I guess one of the other questions that I can't, and I realize it's conceptual, that I cannot read is what is happening with, I'm assuming these are rooftop units. Is there a parapet that is presuming to hide all of those rooftop units? And then the other question I have is there a service yard? And I may be missing that it is. I guess I presume that a building like this would have a service yard. And I think, while I fully understand that you have to get above flood elevation, really looking at how the ramp at the front facade is integrated into the architecture of the building. To me, that is a critical component in developing a nice pedestrian experience to a building.
Let me know when you want me to jump in, Chris.
If you can just go ahead. Thank you, Nicole. Can you go ahead and give us?
Sure. So outdoor storage as an accessory use is permitted in the LC zoning district. It's permitted with conditions. So each outdoor storage area shall be incorporated into the overall design of the principal structure on the site and shall be located to the side or rear of the principal structure. The outdoor storage area shall be screened from view from all property lines and adjacent rights-of-way, and any by a combination of an opaque fence, wall, or landscape berm that's at least 6 feet in height. And then the materials in the outdoor storage area shall not be stored higher than the height of the primary structure. So those are the conditions that go along with outdoor storage. So that fence that you were mentioning within the setback, it cannot be within an adjacent street setback unless it's 4 feet in height. So if that is the setback that you're talking about, it would need to be moved back to behind the setback line so that it can reach that 6-foot height and meet that condition for the outdoor storage.
That's also, Nicole, the fence that we were talking about was on the side. And so it would have to be outside of that setback on the side as well, correct?
Well, it can be up to 7 feet in height along or on or along the common property line. So if it's on the side, it does not need to be behind the setback if it's on the property line. So if it cannot be located on the property line, then yes, it would need to be behind the setback.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Annette,
Can
were
I
you
get the
finished?
clarification? Does that mean that the storage items behind that 6 or 7 foot fence can be up to 40 feet since that's the primary structure height?
Well, it needs to be screened from view. So if the fence is only 6 feet high, then the materials cannot really be higher than that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that all, Annette?
Yes, I'm all
Okay.
set.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Molesky.
Sure, thanks. I guess first, I really don't like the idea of having a storage facility in this location, but that's another conversation. I agree with staff's comments regarding colors and materials and all that kind of stuff, and it seems like today I'm pretty much in full agreement with everything that Annette has to share. To pick on some positive notes on the 3-story component there. I like that little bump out that you guys introduced there at the main entrance and also on the back. I think there's some opportunities to continue to work with that to make it look a little more interesting. And that might be where the opportunity is to add the pitched roof in those locations there to make it feel a little more, friendly and soften things up. To pick on the single story element there, again, I'm going to struggle with trailers and boats parked there and something that's so close to Sea Pine Circle and the beauty of the island there. So definitely want to make sure that whatever fencing and landscaping really needs to satisfy that point. The south elevation of that single story that we're looking at there, I guess that would kind of greet you as you're driving along 278. Maybe do some similar things there to what you did on the 3-story, where you're having that wrap a little bit to make that feel a little more appealing than just looks like the side of a trailer that was really value engineered with nothing going on there. The west elevation is definitely way too monotonous. East elevation there that pretty much would be visible, I think, from Panera, although you had mentioned there's going to be a fence there and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if it's overkill to break up that plane or add some materials or something there, and maybe all that is hidden with the fence. I'm not sure, but if not, I definitely think that needs to have some work on that. I'm counting 16 bays there that you're proposing. I don't know if you break those up into 4 sections and maybe step things back a little bit so it's not just on one plane. And then the other questions that Annette had mentioned, where will the HVAC units be placed? Will they be up on the rooftop? And if so, make sure that those are thoroughly hidden and concealed. And on the back side, I guess, like David had mentioned initially, it looks like there's a lot of parking. I mean, I'm assuming that there's not going to be a plethora of employees there. I don't know if that's all meant just to be, again, additional storage there for boats or trailers or whatnot. But again, just to make sure that is thoroughly concealed from folks driving up and down Dunnigan's Alley. I mean, I could see in the future Dunnigan's perhaps being developed and being a little larger of a thoroughfare. So I think it's our obligation to make sure that we don't just focus on screening things from 278, but also make sure we give Dunnigan's Alley that same attention. Those are all of my comments for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Ms. Foss.
I'm very appreciative that you didn't decide to go 4-story on this lot. And I agree with John in that I really wish this didn't have to be a self-storage unit on 278. But David brought up really great points about the landscaping and also breaking up the roof line. I think he did okay with bringing out the front corner of the building and bringing up those windows, but it's just a flat building all the way around. The flat on the right, the flat on the main building, and it just doesn't go with island character. We don't really go with flat buildings here, and it's I just think it's wrong. Outdoor storage, I don't agree with in any way, shape, or manner. So if you have to have outdoor storage and if it's allowed, it needs to be hidden completely from everyone's view. And I agree with Annette and staff comments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Foss. Yeah, everybody stole all my comments. The building's just it's just all wrong. It needs to have a roof on it. The phase 2 building, there's no reason that should not have a roof on the whole thing. It's small enough. And the big building has to have some sloped roof on it. Like everyone's pointed out, it's too flat, it's too blank, it's too everything. Are the wall panels precast, metal? What are the BMP ones? Are those can anyone on the applicant side answer that?
This is Eddie Buck. I'll jump in. Materials for the building are slated to be brick, and then using decorative metal panels and trim work to be in a horizontal and a vertical pattern to break up the massing of the building with, I guess, louvers down the side of the building. Those would be bronze louvers to serve as basically almost like a window penetration. The main entry is glass storefront that would give it a little more of a, I guess, office type look versus just a square building. The one thing we have to remember in this application, we work on a 10 by 10 structural grid. So everything we do has to be based upon those movements.
Okay. Well, I have no problem with the 10 by 10. You know, exposed metal panels, we'll obviously have to see those. You know, I remember our discussion on the smokehouse where they used some on a very limited area of the building, and that was a huge point of discussion. So we'll need to see those, obviously. But this building has to look like it's an office building. That particular spot on 278, and I think Mr. Molesky brought it up, as people come to our island and they're going to Sea Pines Circle, that traffic stacks up all along 278 right there. So the views into this are going to be long and memorable. The front ramp needs to be more integrated. I believe Ms. Lippert brought that up. It just can't be a concrete ramp, minimalist, just to get up to the door. We just got to see more architecture is about the simplest way to put it. Right. And starting with a roof. This thing's got to have a roof on it. It's got to look, you know, and it's got to look like an office building, not a storage facility. Is there a gate on the, I assume there is. Is there a gate off of 278?
There is.
Is
Also,
it,
kind of to your comments about putting a roof, that we're willing to look at and study the perspective, that elevation from 278 of how we can integrate some kind of sloping roof, and also trying to make it look more pedestrian friendly. Also, you got to realize this is not really a great rendering. We're well beyond the 50-foot buffer. There's a lot of plantings in that 50-foot buffer and significant trees, and the goal is to even enhance that more and more. So this is not going to be a super highly visible building, but it's something that we want to represent the Low Country, and that we can all be proud of. So we're willing to further study that elevation.
okay. And that front gate can't look like a chain link fence on casters, which is what it looks like. That's got to be something nice there. So yeah, I think it needs a lot of work, and the comments have been given. Outdoor storage, needs to not be seen, and that's part of the LMO. So that'll hopefully take care of itself. Typically, we reinforce foundation plantings between buildings, between hard surface and the building. Now on the phase 2, where you'll have garage doors, we can probably get away with not doing that, so you can get in. But that whole driveway on what will be the right side of the phase 2-1 building coming off of William Hilton Parkway, we got to soften up that edge with some landscape there. We can't run the pavement straight up to that blank wall. There's got to be a 5-foot buffer in there of plantings. And, everything Mr. McAllister said just looks like a big area, a big solid area in the back of pavement. Nice if there were some more plants inside. I know this is a private facility, but I don't know how the board looks at that versus if this were a restaurant, for instance, or some boutique shops. We would definitely require more plantings in that contained area. Chris, is there anything LMO-wise that makes it different on the usage as far as plantings within a parking area?
No, I think what's going to catch it is the screening and the requirement that everything that's stored in that exterior lot, open air storage, is going to have to be 100% screened per the LMO that Nicole read. So, they're going to have to meet that requirement. Okay. But there is no requirement to add additional trees. Now, that's not saying that you all can't move in that direction, but there's no requirement in the LMO that they do that.
All right. Thank you. So that's all I have.
Michael, can I address?
Yeah, go ahead.
Michael, this is Eddie Buck. Can I address a little bit of comment on some of the asphalt? The main entrance to this 3-story building is there in the rear for people to bring their goods in and out of. So at times there could be multiple moving vans trying to access that back door. You also have to realize a lot of times these are not experienced drivers in large trucks. So we're trying to give them as much room as possible to maneuver these trucks without running over plantings. We're removing a substantial amount of asphalt that comes in close proximity to these significant trees based upon the current situation. But again, we're trying to give it some flow, give people room to maneuver, and then also have as much room for boat storage as possible in the rears. With the neighborhood covenants, there's nowhere for people to store their boats that are somewhat of a close proximity if they're on a trailer to where they live. And so that's some of the rationale and the goal behind it with using and maintaining some of the gravel area that's existing and also the stormwater that's in place.
Yeah, I would say I'm probably less concerned about what's going on inside the fence than outside. I think that would be a fair statement. And if what's inside the fence meets whatever the LMO requirements are, I'm probably good with all of that. But I don't want to see in.
That's
It's
understood.
got to be screened. The fence has to be the right height. The landscaping has to be the right height. And then, and especially on 278, when that gate rolls open, it does matter what we see when that gate's open. So that gate needs to be nice and it needs to be opaque.
Right.
So we can't see in. And then Mr. Molesky brought up a good point is, Dunnigan's Alley has gone through some transformations over the last 5-6 years. Some of the buildings in there being picked up and businesses moving in. So we don't want to count that as being a back door. It needs to be just as nice as the front. So, but I think the building needs a lot of work. Annette, wait, hold on, Annette. Chris, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I don't think we need to we keep mentioning boat storage in that back area, and while it's allowed, it has to be screened.
Okay.
And the limit is a 7-foot fence. So I guess I would question whether or not you can store a boat in that area and it still be screened with that 7-foot fence.
7 is the maximum. Oh, I thought, okay. For some reason, I thought when Nicole was reading it, it was a minimum on the side. It's a maximum.
It's a maximum of 7 foot.
Okay.
If you're in the setback, it has to go down to 4 foot. That's the maximum in the setback.
I mean, any kind of boat with a canopy on it wouldn't fit below that. It'd have to, it would literally have to be is that Nicole?
Yeah, so you can
Okay.
have a fence up to 4 feet in height only in an adjacent street setback. Even on the sides, it would have to be behind the setback unless it's on the property line. It can be up to 7 feet in height.
Okay.
You can go higher than 7 feet in height behind the setback, but you need to get a building permit for it.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. As long as the applicant's clear on that. Because the only thing that'll fit behind a 7-foot fence would be a ski boat on a low trailer. But anything with a canopy over it or something like that would stick above the fence, would seem to me. So, Annette, sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I don't want what Nicole said to get lost. Nicole said that and I was incorrect. The fence can exceed 7 foot in height as long as it's behind the setback, but it will need a building permit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Annette.
Chris, if you could go back to the rendering, and this is just as I had an opportunity to kind of see that rendering up for a little while, it brought up some questions that are probably more code related, but it will affect the aesthetics, in part because I'm seeing that phase 2 single story kind of hovering in midair. I realize it's a rendering superimposed on a photo, but does that single story storage have to be above flood elevation? Because if so, then I'm wondering how that's going to be achieved and how it will change the aesthetics of the massing of the structure.
Hey, Nicole. Do you have an answer to that question?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, it does need to be above the base flood elevation. And if it's not above base flood elevation, it would have to be constructed with flood-resistant materials. So I would defer to the applicant on that, on what they're planning for that.
I would think if it's conditioned, that would have more of an influence on things if it's conditioned versus non, perhaps.
The initial intent there is for it not to be conditioned space, and that at the time we build that building, we will make sure that it meets the then current floodplain.
All right. Anyone else? Second round? Okay. I'm going to make a recommendation that the applicant withdraw. Chris, would you like to explain the pros and cons of withdrawing versus not withdrawing so that we have it for the record, and then the applicant can decide if they would like to withdraw?
Yes, sir. Per the LMO, if you receive a denial from the design review board, you're not allowed to come back to the design review board without substantially changing the project for a full year. So we can argue and go round and round on what a substantial change to the project is, but at this time it looks like you're facing a denial in the vote in the DRB. So the prudent thing would be to preserve your right to come back to the DRB and withdraw the project at this point. But whatever you decide to do, if you do decide to withdraw, I'm going to need you to formally state that.
Can we ask for a deferral whereby we go and restudy the project and then come back to you?
You are more than...
Yeah, we could table it, but it has to come back. I mean, I'm going to be blunt. It has to come back looking differently.
Well, that's why we need some time to really study the project, and I think if you are willing to table it, we're willing to look at it and take all your comments into consideration and see if we can make it work.
Okay. Any
any
objections?
So we're asking for tabling.
Any advice or objections from staff on that, Chris?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay. All right. The applicant has requested that we table this. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move that we, sorry, I don't have those numbers in front of me. Someone else has to do it, sorry.
Oh, I'll state it for you. William Hilton Parkway Self-Storage, DRB 001794-2020. Ms. Foss will make a motion.
I make a move that this project gets tabled till further notice. Thank you.
All right. Hey, Kathy, not to be a stickler, but could you just state that it's tabled until the time that the applicant comes back before the board, instead of the further notice was a little vague.
This project is tabled until project comes back with, I'm sorry. Okay, this project is tabled until the applicant comes back with further changes. Thank you.
That'll work. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a second. Was that you, Mr. McAllister?
It was.
We have a second from Mr. McAllister. Ms. Teresa, any further discussion on the motion? All right, Ms. Teresa, would you please run roll?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lippert?
Yes.
Ms. Foss?
Yes.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Gensman?
Yes. So the motion to table passes unanimously. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to board business. Do we have any board business? No hands. All right. Chris, do we have a minor corridor report?
There were no more minor corridor approvals since your last meeting.
All right. Does anyone have any final parting words before I officially end it? All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.